Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of We Got Balls. And today it's Danger Will Robinson. Here you go. Where you got the warning signs, the 7 warning signs that, that, that your life is headed for disaster. Because when we are doing this work, we talk to all kind of guys that have all kind of stories about how their life is falling apart, how they're afraid their life is going to fall apart, how their life is already falling apart, and they're trying to put it back together. We are trying to get you ahead of the game and allow you to know what you can look for so your life doesn't go to shit. So if you want to know more about those warning signs and how you can be proactive to take care of yourself, stick around. We'll be right back.
Welcome to We Got Balls, real, raw, masculine sex talk with Chris Inman and Scott Cohn. Here we go.
Hey, Scott, how do you find out when new stuff shows up on YouTube? I'm just curious.
Well, I subscribe to the channels that I like, and I get notified when they've had new episodes released.
What are some of your favorite channels?
I like Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson. I like the Sean Ryan Show. I like Joe Rogan. I like
Pearly Things. You ever watch Pearly Things?
Never.
Pearly Things is she's a great content creator. I love watching Pearly Things. And you know one of the best shows on YouTube these days?
That would be We Got Balls.
We Got Balls. I've heard that's a really up and coming show. A lot of people are talking about it. It's going to be huge. You never know.
It's controversial.
It's real and raw and all those things. And the way that you got to find out about that is you got to click that bell on YouTube and subscribe so that you get all the updates about everything that comes through on the We Got Balls channel so that you don't miss a thing.
So, guys, if you like We Got Balls, and who doesn't, subscribe so you get the notifications when we got new shows dropping and special events and special recordings. We love having you in our audience, and we want to make sure you get all the updates.
And click that bell.
Bing.
Well, hey guys, welcome back to We Got Balls. And Scott, I don't know about you, but in my life, I've had some really desperate times, some really dark and bleak times in my life. And especially when I was younger, you know, I would just power through and I would just hope things would get better. But as I got older, you know, I'm 46. You're a young 62, very young and attractive 62. Look at you.
Thank you very much.
Very nice. You know, we've had our seasons where just shit wasn't working out. And so as I got older, I really stopped hoping that things would just get better on their own and started to listen for the things in my life that are not working well and going to people that I trust and saying, help. Yeah. What's going on? So when you think about this idea of heading for a disaster in your own story, what comes up for you?
Yeah. I mean, we were talking before we started recording today, like this whole idea of how do I know it's time to really get some help? How do I know it's time to really do something about my unwanted behaviors? And for me, I think back to, you know, I got into recovery in the, beginning of 2014. And what got me into recovery was, let me just kind of go back and recount a little bit of that story. Is I had taken a job. I was kind of a founding member of a company where I was being required to travel a lot for business. And in that travel, I started spending a lot of time alone in hotel rooms at night. And as I was doing that and dealing with the loneliness of being on the road and kind of being isolated from my family, I was also dealing with a lot of stress back home. I had a daughter that had a substance abuse problem. So when I would go on the road, she would tend to act out, causing a lot of chaos for my wife and the rest of the family. And that is the pattern we lived in for, 7 years. So from 2006 is when this really started cranking up. Through 2013, I was really in a state of distress for those years and not really recognizing that it was going on. So I'm feeling more and more isolated, spending more and more time with myself, engaging in, started going back to pornography and masturbation a lot while I'm in the hotel rooms at night, feeling bored, feeling tired, feeling lonely. I mean, feeling stressed, all of those. We talk about HALT BS, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, bored, stressed. I had all of that going on in my life. And then the pornography use and the masturbation started making me feel a lot of shame because I was going back to, I was looking at porn and trying to find comfort in connecting with guys. I had gone through a period where when we moved to Houston in 1996, all I did for 18 years, Chris, was get in the car in the morning. At 4 in the morning, I would go work out at the YMCA in downtown Houston. I would go to my job. I would work at my job for 9 hours, and then I would get back in the car and drive home. I was commuting 3 hours a day, working 9 hours a day, and then coming home exhausted and having to care for my family, 6 kids, one of whom had a substance abuse struggle that was creating a lot of havoc in the family. And I had no friendships. I had no male friends.
So let's start there, because I think when we think about the warning signs that things are really falling apart, I think it's because we prioritize connection in what we do. This whole podcast exists because of our connection. So let's start with this warning sign of relationships. So what relationally is a warning sign that you're headed for disaster?
I think the number one sign is isolation. I don't have any friendships, right?
Yes. Yep.
So when I think about friendship, Chris, I'm not talking about acquaintances. We live in a day and age where we have a lot of acquaintances and we call them friends.
Yep.
But bro, if you're not talking on a regular basis, and my preference is the strength of a friendship can be determined as like, when's the last time I talked to you? We talk every week. We talk multiple times a week.
We do. Well, we also do this, and I want to be very explicit. We text during the week. We'll reach out, but there's one thing that makes, I think, a friendship really key is when I have a need, I'm willing to reach out and ask for help and get your input. And we do that with each other. Hey, can you talk? Or we'll send each other something we're thinking about and really process through it. And I think that's the difference in these young, immature friendships where you show up, you have a good time, you talk about surfacey stuff, and you call them friends, versus real life friends where you're, to go back to the words that we love to use, you're bearing one another's burdens. You're carrying shit for each other so you don't have to be alone in it.
Yes, that's true. But here's the problem with that is when you grow up with complex trauma, if you grow up in a rigid or disengaged family system, which we've talked a lot about, I don't have a lot of experience with reaching. Like, think of the movement of just reaching my hand out and asking for help. What does that feel like, right?
It's been slapped down so many times. Why would I do that again? It seems
or ignored when I reach out. And so what my body anticipates is that when I reach out, there's not going to be any positive response to my request for help. Number one. But number two, the way culture socializes us as men is we're supposed to be independent. We're supposed to be islands. We're not supposed to be weak. We're not supposed to be, and asking for help is weakness, right?
Yeah.
So you've got these dual things going on where the culture is telling us one thing about masculine relationships and friendship, and then your family system is telling you another layer. And it's very difficult to admit as a man, I could use your help.
I agree. So let's just take the other piece of relationships. So number one is isolation. Number two is many of the people that we talk to in our own stories, your significant other, your marriage, maybe your family, but definitely your partner, you're having trouble connecting with them. So maybe you got into a relationship and you're in an environment where things are great and the honeymoon is wonderful and you start a family together or you go do life together, and then things begin to fall apart because of what you just said. I can't really trust you with my heart. I can trust you with most things, but there's certain stuff in my life that I just can't talk about my struggle, my brokenness. I don't know if I can trust you to be there for me. And so that separation and that individuation in a relationship starts to happen, and you start becoming, instead of partners, you move more towards roommates, or maybe you're even just enemies living in the same house because you can't afford to move out. And we get a lot of people that when they reach out to us, they're doing so because they want to save their relationship. They think their relationship is in crisis, and porn or sexually acting out is the culprit, when really what we see is that's the fruit of so much of the stuff that you're just talking about, the inability to know yourself and care for yourself and trust other people.
Yeah. And the root of this is, how do I deal with my desires and disappointments in relationship, which goes back to my story. When I wanted something growing up, when I went to my parents and asked for something, how was I responded to? If I was not given what I was desiring, or if I was not attuned to in that, how were my emotions handled? And so often we find out neither our desires nor our emotions were honored and provided any care for. And so we tend to bring that dynamic of how we relate both into friendship as well as our intimate relationship with our spouse. So when do these problems start showing up? They start showing up in your mid 40s and 50s typically, because up to that point, when you're married, you get married in your 20s, right? You start having kids. It starts becoming about just surviving, paying the bills, raising the kids, blah, blah, blah. And what happens over time is there's this relational drift where the marriage partnership isn't being invested in, and neither is your male friendships. And that's why today there's this crisis of male loneliness. And the group of men that suffer the most are men in their 40s and 50s, which coincidentally is when the crisis starts to show up in your sexual life, because this is the time where you start experiencing what was classically kind of termed the midlife crisis. But it's really about this sense of purposelessness and aimlessness relationally that just kind of organically grows up if you're not consciously investing in relationship, both marriage and friendship.
So if you guys are listening, Scott just backed up the dump truck of a bunch of different danger signs that we're going to break down and be specific with. So let's start with the midlife crisis. Emotionally, where do men go in the midst of that 35 to 50 range? What happens in isolation, in relational disconnection and disruption? Where do they go emotionally, Scott?
Well, they start taking their emotions primarily to pornography, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
their sexuality starts going to pornography, because as your wife is, doing a lot of the home stuff, which women still bear a lot of the home burden, even if they work outside the home. So they're exhausted all the time. The sex life kind of becomes very functional at that standpoint. We do it once or twice or three times a week. And it starts to lose a lot of its vitality because it's just becoming a rote, kind of mechanical, let's just stick it in and get it done.
Right. So
And
what feelings kind of float to the surface while they're trying to use porn and trying to regulate with other substances and experiences? What are the common emotional experiences of midlife for men?
I'm not feeling desired. I'm not
Yeah.
feeling pursued. I'm
Yeah.
not feeling excitement in my relationship. I'm feeling alone. I'm feeling isolated.
Which leads me to depression and anxiety.
Yep.
And those feelings, while they may be there younger, they may be more, you may be more prone to them based upon your family of origin and all the things that you've dealt with in your life. But that's a big warning sign that things really have to change, is when you're struggling with debilitating depression and or anxiety.
So let's talk about anxiety and depression. So we would call that emotional distress, right? So the first sign is relational distress. The second sign would be emotional distress. And really, you have to wonder which comes first. It's kind of the chicken or the egg. Do I start to feel emotionally distressed because my relationships are fraying, or does my emotional distress start to cause my relationships to fray? It could be either way. It could be both. But when I start to deal with a lot of anxiety, I have to think about inviting guys to be more connected with their bodies. And this is again another problem that's very typical and common with males. We have something called male normative alexithymia, which is most males are socialized as we grow into men to not pay attention to our emotions, to kind of discount them, ignore them, and just press on in life. Because being emotional or being in touch with your body is seen as kind of female normative, not male normative. We're supposed to be out facing the world, conquering, kingdoms, bringing home the bacon and all of that stuff. But we're not supposed to be introspective and thinking about what am I feeling in my body right now? And what happens is men, because of the way we're socialized then, tend to suffer with a lot of anxiety or a lot of depression or both. And it's all held in the body. So typically this kind of shows up in tightness in my shoulders, tightness in my chest, neck, may have a lot of headaches. but this is a bodily based experience, the anxiety, kind of both can be a combination of anger and fear in my body, but I don't know how to recognize that. And so I'm just carrying all this tension in my body. On the other side of it, because I'm not feeling my feelings of anxiety or anger or fear, and I push those down, right? That's what depression is. What is depression? It's this pushing down. I'm depressing. What am I depressing? My anger and fear.
Yeah.
So, or my grief. There's
Yep.
sorrow, there's loss
Yep.
in my life, and I'm not allowed to grieve that. And
It is compressed grief. We've got, desire and disappointments. We're going to say it all the time. When we don't face our disappointments and give them time to be grieved, it leads us into anger, lust, and ultimately depression and debilitating anxiety.
So what does that depression feel like in the body? It has a different feeling. It's an emptiness, a hollowness, a drained of energy, just a listlessness, a checked outness, a numbness, a fogginess. And I can vacillate between those two poles and start to do that on a daily basis where I wake up with a lot of anxiety, a lot of, we call it the red zone, over arousal. I'm just ramping up in my nervous system, and I stay in there for a while, and then my body goes, enough of that. And it puts me over into this blue zone of depression or a lot of shame and just this listlessness. And I live my life in that basis. And I'm never living my life up here where I feel really good things in my body that are either lower or higher energy. And it just becomes this vicious cycle. So really, Chris, the first big piece of this is relational. And the second big piece of this is emotional. Emotional dysregulation is the psychological term, but either too much arousal or too little arousal becomes a real warning sign in how I'm headed for a crash.
Scott, sometimes you just got to go deep, got to get serious. You've got to do things that you don't want to do. And how do you do that, Scott? How do you get really, really into the weeds with where you're struggling?
I don't know, because you still have me at deep.
Well, another word for deep is intense. And we do intensives. We got balls, successful men intensives, where we have guys who join us for a weekend, a Thursday to Sunday midday. And it's a small group of guys, very personal setting, to really get to the heart of where they're struggling.
So guys, if you've been at recovery for a while and you're just stuck in a place, things are not working for you, we want to invite you to check out one of our weekend intensives. You can do that at wegotballspod.com or successfulmen.com and sign up on our wait list. And when we have enough interested guys, we'll let you know.
And we'll be scheduling these very soon. So you want to get on the list and make sure that you are first up to be in one of these events, because it will be life-changing and transformational. Definitely was true for me.
And there's a lot of fun and laughter at those intensives.
Oh my
as well.
gosh.
So.
Oh, all the poetry and the songs we made at the last intensive will go on forever. You do not want to miss a We Got Balls Successful Men Intensive. Sign up now.
So, Chris, I've given a couple of things from my own experience that I started to notice where I was headed for a crash. What about you? What's your story around this?
Yeah, for me, I think that depression and anxiety was a big piece of it, because I definitely had an experience where in the same year I was fired from 2 different jobs. And that was kind of the shock to my system of, I'm in the middle of this struggle. I'm trying to raise a young family. I don't know what to do. I thought I had a plan. My plan's falling apart. But what also happened during that season was I really began to be really down on myself. I had started having a lot of negative self-talk, which was really a big warning sign for me, is that I thought I could do this. I had some level of confidence and hope that this could change. And when these 2 experiences happened, I called it going into my wilderness phase, because I was like giving up, like, why get out of bed? I was really negative on myself and really not even thinking I had the capacity to do anything good. And that shame that was verbalized, I think, was a big piece in realizing I had to do something different. I couldn't just keep going through life the same way. And so I started recovery in that season. After losing those 2 jobs, started to go to retreats to talk about my feelings and connect with other guys, and get in my body an experience of, I would say that began my series of my season of passive recovery,
Hmm.
where I was open to listening to things and taking in new experiences, but I wasn't really consistent with practicing them.
So there was no real crisis that you had kind of engineered, which is, sometimes we tend to typically engineer our own crises, but there was nothing really going on in that regard. It was just, well, unless you look at losing your job can be a real crisis point for men, right? Because
It was a huge crisis because that was my identity. I mean, it was 2 jobs at churches where I was working at churches. The second job, I was only there for 20 days.
so you lost a lot of sense of purpose, didn't you,
I
in
lost a
losing
lot of
those
sense
jobs?
of identity. I
Yeah,
didn't know who I was, and which
yeah,
made me question everything. So I think I would say in my story, one was this first uh, identity crisis, and then 6 years later was where the another one of the warning signs came in, which was risky sexual behavior, which I ramped up my acting out. I had, my marriage was in a difficult place for a few years. And I was like, okay, so what do I do? So I get on dating apps. I start chatting with other people who's not my wife. And then I start engaging the possibility of meeting with these people and having physical encounters with these people, which I would have never done before. And that risky sexual behavior was totally out of character with my story, with who I said I was going to be doing. But that warning sign for me was like, okay, this passive recovery, while it makes me feel good, it doesn't really change anything. It was at the same time that I started ramping up my risky sexual behavior that I actually started pursuing recovery through support groups, through making phone calls, through uh, really doing my story work more intentionally and not just kind of letting that happen when it may, but being very purposeful about and going to therapy. I mean, I had a whole year of therapy after that as well, which was necessary to kind of reset things for me. But so those two things together, that negative self-talk and risky sexual behaviors, was kind of like my 1-2 punch of warning signs to say, I need to do something different.
yeah. So let's take a sidebar on therapy for a moment, because we were talking about this earlier this week. Is men are very unlikely to seek therapeutic help or to seek recovery help at all until there's a real crisis that has to be dealt with. And why is that? And I think there's a lot of, again, cultural reasons that go into this. Therapy in general, 70% of therapists are females, right? And 70% of those who seek therapy are females as well, because therapy has been, the way it was developed was mainly talk therapy. Like, we want to just talk about your emotions and your feelings. And I think for a lot of men, that feels very weak and useless. Like, what good does it do to talk about what I'm feeling? Like, I want to solve this problem. I want to fix, right? And so, because of the way therapy was originally developed and started, and then the number of female therapists versus male therapists, and then just kind of the overall engaging your emotions and talking about your emotions, it seems very unmasculine to most men.
Well, so let me put some context on that. To what you say, we as men innately want to act. That's hardwired into our DNA. And therapy seems like passive help when we're seeking active help. So I think there's a hybrid that can exist where that's why we're in coaching, because coaching is a little more focused on, I want to see you, I want to talk about your context, give you some information, but I always give guys in my coaching one action step. They never leave a conversation without one thing that they can do differently to try out. It's not going to be a fix, but it's going to be an action step that helps them move into what's next.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And I totally agree with you. Guys tend to want fixes for their problems, which you may not have the answer for right away until you experiment with a lot of different things. So you have to try out things, but that's part of what it allows you to do, is have a sense of agency when you felt really powerless in a lot of your trauma and, your family system growing up. So that's why I think it's important for men not to just talk about their emotions. We do engage men with their emotions and asking them to think about what's going on in their bodies. But then taking that next step is, so what is that emotion inviting you to do actually about that situation? And what can you try to make that shift happen internally? So Yeah, I can agree with you on the risky sexual behavior, or I can identify with you on the risky sexual behavior, because as I started to get deeper and deeper into my pornography addiction, I started to want to take it further. And so I started to do chats online, sexting, exchanging pictures, and even posting, looking for hookups that I would then eventually not go through with. I would feel a lot of shame after doing that. But I start, taking things way further than I ever thought I would go. And so that risky sexual behavior is really about acceleration and pushing boundaries that you've never gone into before. And I think we all start off when we start using porn and masturbation as a coping, soothing mechanism, survival strategy, whatever you want to call it. We think it's going to stop there, but it never does. It always tends to get worse over time. And that's a sign of an addictive behavior or pattern that's showing up. And so you have to kind of be honest with yourself about that. And I'm really taking this much further than I ever thought I'd go.
Would you call that degradation in the search for variety?
Yeah, I would.
Yep. So I think in those pieces, Scott, that's typically a big warning sign. Is guys have gone and done things that were out of their character. They didn't think they were possible. They had that in their potential of doing that. And so when we hear guys, it's almost like this hollow, shame-filled, I can't believe I've done this, give me an explanation. And there's really no explanation or answer. It's just the care that I got when I did the thing that I swore I would never do. Was I told my story to a female therapist, by the way, but she's a Texan, so she could kick my ass if she wanted to. Is that she was very empathetic, but what she said to me, that totally makes sense that you would want to do that in this season of your life. Circumstantially, a lot of shit was falling apart, and I was looking for a handhold of physical, I'm going to call it intimacy, connection, a substitute for the real in my life. And this acting out dynamic made me feel that in the moment. Of course, immediately was one of the most shameful experiences of my life, but that's how we learn, right?
Yeah. And I'll say this too, that I have worked with a number of guys who are not, here's a great example of this. I've worked with a number of guys who are not sexually attracted to or aroused by guys, who were not sexually abused as children by guys, but they find themselves in their acting out pattern actually getting to a place where they have a sexual experience with a man. And it is mystifying to them, like it's shocking to them. They don't identify as gay. They've never had that experience in their life until somewhere in their 40s, they're going to an adult bookstore and, having an encounter with a guy there. And it really rocks their world. And my response to that is usually, well, there's a story here. There was something about that experience that is pointing you back to something in your past that needs to be engaged. You may not be attracted to guys, I believe you, but there's something about that experience that was rooted in your past story that we need to get curious about and start exploring so you can make sense out of why you ended up doing what you did. And boy, that is so common with all of us, not just the type of sexual behavior or the individual that we're attracted to, but we get to that point where we do something and we're like, I never thought I would go here. And yet we end up in that place.
And Scott, I think to put a point on that, that's another one of the big warning signs is that you get to that place of intense shame and a very intense emotional reaction. I can't believe I've gone and done the thing I swore I would never do. And that level of visible, emotive shame is what we really see on the faces of almost every man we talk to when we first meet them, is that they've gotten to a place in their life that they're like, oh, fuck. How did I get here? How am I going to get out? Because I am not the person that I want to be.
Yep. And we've both been there ourselves, right? And it's a terrible place to be because it just amplifies that negative self-talk. It amplifies the anxiety. It amplifies the depression. It amplifies my relational disruption. I begin to isolate more. I begin to become very secretive and hidden in my behavior. And I begin to continually judge myself over and over again. So, just it's a vicious cycle. And you think, well, I've gone here, I've learned my lesson, I'm going to stop now. This has gone too far. But that's not the way it works, is it?
No. In fact, the longer you stay there, the more you're going to be stuck there. And I think that's the real difficulty of shame is, we think we act out because we're looking for a distraction or we're looking for a high. We actually act out. We actually do the things that we say we don't want to do, but we really enjoy doing because that's what we believe that we really are. It's out of shame that we get stuck. And so the invitation in this conversation is to be kind to yourself. We say that every single week. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. What we mean by that is there's another way other than what you're feeling in your body right now to live your life. And maybe, as Scott said earlier, maybe nobody was there for you to teach you that.
And that's the bigger point is it's almost impossible to be kind to yourself until you engage your story, because until you can understand why you got to that place of doing something that you never thought you would do, which isn't about the moment that you did that thing. It's going way back to your childhood where the groundwork is laid for you actually doing that thing in your 40s or 50s. You're not going to be kind to yourself. The tendency will be to judge yourself and to turn to self-contempt to try to control the behavior, which ironically makes it worse.
Should all over myself. That's the therapy language, but I literally had to banish that word from my vocabulary for several years because I couldn't stop shoulding all over myself.
I refuse to say should or shouldn't anymore.
Yeah, well, it's, we think language doesn't matter, but language is huge. It's the limit of my world. So if I should do this or shouldn't do this, and I keep doing it, what does that say about who I am? That keeps me
I'm
stuck.
a worthless piece of shit.
Exactly. So one more thing that's a huge warning sign, and really this warning sign, I think, is it covers over all the age groups from young to old, is when guys show up and they don't know what their life is about. They don't have any purpose. Purposelessness is a huge warning sign for guys when they're about to hit disaster, because a man without a purpose is a man waiting to burn something down.
Yeah, dude. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the Nazi concentration camps, wrote a phenomenal book. It's a small book. Everybody here listening should read it. Man's Search for Meaning, right? And he found that in the Nazi concentration camps, there are those that flourished and there are those that floundered and just didn't really do well. And the difference that he noted, and this guy was a trained psychologist before, or psychotherapist before he went into the camp, is just being self-observant and observing others. He found out that guys that had a sense of purpose and meaning while they were incarcerated and being punished and going through that trauma could flourish even in the midst of it. Because the one thing that the external world can never take away from you is your choice, no matter what. You can always choose your attitude by which you're experiencing the things you're experiencing. And you can begin to see yourself as a victim, or you can begin to see yourself as a victorious person, even in the midst of severe distress. And so that purposelessness has to be grounded, though, Chris, in something bigger than just you. And that's the bigger issue for men.
And let's circle back. So everything that we do is a circle, guys. If you don't notice this, we're all about the circles. We love making things a process. Let's go back to the beginning where we started. The first warning sign was isolation. I can't find my purpose in isolation. I can't, because what you just said is so true. I can't get out of my own mind, my own stuckness. I need to listen to the stories of other men. I need to watch what they do well or don't do well. I need to have relational dynamics with them so they can tell me what's good about me and what I need to focus on to find my purpose. Because by myself, I'm just going to wander around the woods. But when I go hunting with a tribe, when I sit in the circle of other men, when I connect with masculinity, these active, powerful people who are trying to change the world for good, I can fit in and find my niche in that grand scheme of things.
And this is not weakness. This is strength, actually, because you don't have the ability to diagnose your own blind spots. Neither do I. That's why they're called blind spots. I need a brother who goes, hey, dude, did you realize you got some shit on your pants?
Or say, hey, Scott, I got your 6. I'm on your back. Don't
Or
worry
look,
about it.
let me get that off for you, right? And
Yeah.
and so I want to insert this thing about Viktor Frankl though, because this is important on the
Yep.
Viktor Frankl piece.
Go back.
So Viktor Frankl is really famous for saying this: when man does not have his purpose, all he has is pleasure. So
Ooh.
so the role that our going to unwanted sexual behavior plays is to give us an artificial and temporary sense of purpose when we really have lacking purpose. And in Jay's book Unwanted, he showed that men who struggle with purposelessness are 7 times more likely to have a unwanted sexual behavior problem.
Wow. Wow. Well, guys, there's a lot more there, and we could go ramble on and would love to engage with you on where you fall in the spectrum of danger signs that your life is, or warning signs that your life is headed for disaster. But the most important thing that we want to invite you to do is to be curious. I was talking with a guy yesterday, and I love my hiking analogies because I'm a big, follow the path thing. So I came up with this new thing, which I think is really helpful. You know what the 2 hiking poles of walking your path is?
No.
Curiosity and kindness.
Oh.
With one stick, I'm probing to make sure where I'm going is secure and safe and good for me. With the other stick, I'm offering myself support so that I don't fall, or when I've got to get through a difficult situation that I need help with.
Man, that's good.
Those 2 things right there, guys, are really what makes the world go around relationally. Nothing that we said today is going to fix your life. We're not trying to fix your life. We're trying to invite you into a relationship. So connect today with people who you think are safe for you. If you don't have a place to connect, reach out to us. We'll be glad to help you with that. And keep listening. One of the big things we want to say, I don't know if you've noticed this. You see this picture, Scott? You love this? That's thanks to the faithful viewers on YouTube. I have a brand new camera that makes me look glorious and well lit. So Scott's getting one as well. We're taking the revenue that you guys send to us and the ways that you invest in this channel by watching us, and we're making it better for you. We want to make sure that your experiences and your engagement with yourself and this content continues to improve. So thank you so much for being with us. And we always want to challenge you and make you feel safe right here on We Got Balls.
And you do too.
Take care, everybody.
Don't forget to subscribe for more episodes. You can connect with Chris and with Scott at successfulmen.com.